For a long time, I've always been able to start pepper seeds, but I really struggled with them. And then I started really honing in on it. And, you know, one year I just remember being like, screw it. If I don't do it right next year, I'm not growing peppers from seed anymore. Well, here we are growing peppers from seeds, so you know what that means. Before we go to start some pepper seeds, I did move that trellis over to the front of the garden. So it's funny, you can't even see it because it's so empty right now, but I think I like the way it looks. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I think it gives a nice entry point into it, into the garden. Shortly, couple days or so, something like that, I'm going to do a video about rearranging stuff in your garden. I think it falls in line with what I was talking about different sizes, gardens and stuff like that, and how it opens up possibilities for me. But let's get into the pepper seeds. All right, I pre-filled my trays here. These have a lot of holes in them. So, I'm not sure what it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. I believe these are 60 cell trays. So we're only going to do two trays of peppers, but that's 120 plants. A lot of peppers. But yeah, there's a lot to do with peppers, and I've been waiting to start them. My soil was frozen, and I'm out here today. I'm in coastal North Carolina, by the way, and today it's 38 degrees. But because everything is in the shade, there's still ice and stuff. And actually, my faucet here is broken. The valve got stuck frozen. So yeah, I'm gonna have to work on that. But we're currently watering the garden, so it's got to run for a little bit. Starting pepper seeds has always been one of my passions. I believe it was actually one of the first plants I started from seed, which made it I believe it was a hot pepper. And I struggled, and this was it was probably a lot longer than I'd like to admit. Probably around 10 years ago maybe, and I started them every year to some extent. You know, I'd bounce back and forth, and then I wouldn't start some one year, and then, you know, for 3 years I'd start them, and then I'd take a break, because I always struggled a little bit with them. And peppers are particularly difficult. They do a couple things. So one, they take forever to germinate, right? At least so I thought. I know that was a bit of a cliffhanger there, but the reason why is because they took forever to germinate, but there was a lot of things occurring there. So, and a lot of this is a resort of how I start my seeds now. And you can see we make this little seed bed, and then we just barely push in so the seed can lay on top. And I've showed my process before. I'll show you again, because there's always new people starting. But this is what led me to do this method, and what caused me to start having conversations with people about it, and really searching out other directions. Because what was really happening was actually, there was multiple things happening, and we're going to break all of that down. But let's start at the very beginning. Okay, so, and really when I say the beginning, it's the beginning of the seed starting process, and then we'll graduate from there. What was happening was, one, I was making my own soil. You can make your own soil, it works just fine, but it was a little bit heavy, and so the seed was actually having a hard time coming up out of the substrate, is a technical term. So I was having issues with that. And the other thing was, I was probably burying them a little bit too deep. So let's take these purple pepper seeds real quick. So the general thought is you want to plant 2 times deeper than the width of the seed. So this one's fairly large in relatively speaking terms. So you can see that you need to plant it, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch deep, maybe a little bit more than that. And it's really hard to do. I mean, look, I don't have micrometer eyes. I can't figure this stuff out. So I kind of went back to the drawing board, and I started doing it this way. And by the way, before I really get into it, we're starting today. We have purple peppers, California Wonder peppers, Texas A&M jalapenos, and Hungarian wax peppers, which all of those are available in our seed shop. There's actually a link on the screen at the end of the video that you can take to go buy those if you feel so inclined. And we're doing cayenne peppers that I saved seeds from previously. How this method really became born was by really needing to keep those seeds from being trapped in the soil, and it's really helped. But the other issue has really become the germination time, and speeding up the germination is really what we want to do. And it's really a straightforward thinking process, but at the same time it's a little bit backwards. What I'm referring to is quite simply bottom heat. So bottom heat doesn't need to go on everything by any stretch of the imagination, but peppers can really benefit from it. They need a lot of heat to really start that process. And so what we learned is by adding bottom heat to it will help to really speed up the germination. And from the point of where we were taking 20 days to get germination, we got it down to 7 to 10 days like it's advertised to have. And this is just because we're trying to cheat the system and start our seeds inside. So we're working on that. Not all bottom heat is equal. So there are bottom heat mats, and we're just gonna call them heat mats. There are heat mats that have a thermostat in them that you can adjust. I don't have any of those. I just use standard, non-regulated bottom heat, and they work fine. But you don't really want to put them on like your brassicas and stuff like that, because they can get a little too hot. Excuse me, because they're unregulated heat. So just make sure you're using that to your advantage. But for most of the seeds that we're starting from this point forward, we will be applying bottom heat, and we will be putting the bottom heat on so that it will start through the germination, and then we'll leave it on for about a week afterwards, maybe even 2 after they've germinated, so they can really get comfortable, and then we can kind of back off a little bit on that heat. So it works out pretty good in order to speed up your germination. I had a bit of an indecisive moment, so I kind of go back and forth about how many cayenne plants I want to start. One reason is I don't eat a lot of cayennes. I do have a specific purpose for them, and which is I want to try and make some hot sauce with them. It's just some real mildly flavored sauce. And the other issue is they're not really good sellers. So people really want those more exotic hot pepper plants. So I don't want to start too many of them. So I was just kind of checking to see what I could kind of work in there if possible. Other part of this too is watering. So I know it's really rudimentary to talk about watering, but we're talking about a specific set of issues. Wow, there's like hardly any cayenne pepper seeds, so I think I'm good to go. It's, you know, real rudimentary concept, but because of this issue with germination time, watering becomes an issue, because if you overwater and you keep the soil too wet, which is really easy to do, you actually have your seeds will rot in the soil, and then you won't have anything grow. Case in point is, look at my parsnips from this year. If you didn't see the last video, which was a bee video, I had actually harvested the only parsnip that grew. But the reason why we didn't have parsnips was because we had a hurricane with a lot of rain, and combined that with an extra long germination time of 21 days, we actually did not have any parsnips because they rotted in the ground. So look at that perfect amount. So we had to, you know, it's the same with the peppers. You just got to let them kind of finish out and start growing. I water them once in the beginning, so I'm gonna start more jalapeno seeds. I like jalapenos. Hold on, let me, before I get on a crazy ass rant, let me just go on and say, then, you know, depending on the germination time, I may not water for a week, maybe even 2, because it's super easy to drown the seeds. So the way that it works with all plants, this applies to everything, but we're going to directly apply it to peppers right now, or yeah, peppers, is because they will, once the roots start to grow, they will consume more water. But you have to think, in the beginning, you have the tiniest of tiny roots, and you don't want to overwhelm them, so they need to use up the moisture in the soil. Now, when it comes to peppers and anything with bottom heat, and you add that bottom heat, that will dry out the soil even faster. So we have to be very careful about that. Now, the other side of the coin is what I do is I put covers over them before they germinate. And, you know, I have clear plastic covers that I put on, and they will hold the moisture and the humidity in. So what you'll do is you'll come out and you'll see that there are, you know, the humidity is building up in there, and it's putting all of that moisture into that cover, and that helps keep the top soil moist. Which, remember, if we're starting our seeds correctly and we're going twice the depth of the seed, of the diameter of the seed, there's not much space. It doesn't matter how wet it is at the bottom. You got to keep that seed moist. That's what's important. And keeping that seed moist is where you can go. So if you put that cover on there and that humidity forms on the cover, then it will drip down and it will help keep it up. You're kind of almost creating your own water cycle. You're almost creating rain to an extent. I mean, it's not technically rain, but it condenses on the top. And then once it cools at the top, it'll rain back down on top. And I mean, look, it's not like you're gonna look in there, there's gonna be a hurricane, but that's how it is. So I had to change my setup slightly, and I'll show you what I did. I bought these crappy plant markers, and they were too tall. So when I put my cover on, there was actually a gap about this much. So I just cut a piece of, I got a little cheap plastic cutting board from the Dollar Tree, like 2 of them, and I cut, I don't know, I could probably get 100 or so out of them, but I cut some, and they're low enough now so that the cover can sit on it and keep it nice and sealed. That creates another conundrum all in itself, where I'm going to top dress now with perlite. Excuse me, perlite. Everybody keeps getting on me about the way I say it. Back off. That's the way I say it. I'm from the South. We say things weird. So I use this perlite because it holds a little bit of moisture, but it's still nice and fluffy so that the seed can push out of it. And this was the exact seed that I started this for, and I just so happened to adopt it for every other seed that I do now. And it's worked great. And most people that have seen me do this on the channel have in turn started doing it and seem to say they like it. So if you've done it and you like it, get yourself a pinned comment and mention it, and we'll pin you to the top, because this has really changed the game for me in starting my seeds. And you can see how much we're putting on. Now, for all the new viewers that haven't been there, let me address one thing for you. Don't use vermiculite. I'm not interested in using vermiculite. It holds too much water, and it in turn becomes too heavy. This, although it's been outside so it's wet, once it dries, it's light as, I mean, you can blow on it and it'll push out of the way. So this holds the right amount of moisture for me, and this has worked really well. Now, if I don't see something coming up and it's been a while, I'll show you what I do. Keep a chopstick in my seed starting area specifically for this, but let's say this cell right here is not popping up. I'll take my chopstick and then I'll just kind of work this away, which I'm sure some of you have done with your soil, but with this, it's not as, you know, if you look, I don't know if you can see this, but we're going to just assume you can. If I move this one pellet of perlite out of the way, there's the seed. So, you know, you don't have to really dig around with the soil, because what can happen when you're digging around with soil can actually end up burying the seed even more, and that's not something you want to do. That's not, I mean, you're going backwards at that. You're not kind of, you are going backwards at that point. So that helps with that. And the other thing is, when I do my I pre-wet my soil, and then after I start them, I wet them. Wet these really good, because as you remember, this is the last time they're going to get water for a little while. Then that perlite on top actually doesn't compress as much. And you can see like how it's starting to fill up right there. So it's easy to see, but then it traps the seed down. And now I see an issue coming up because we put too much water on. So let's look. So you can see the seed right here. So all I'll simply do is just cover it up again. Right, here's the seed right here, and I can just, and so you can get those really to the right depth that you want, and it's so light that it can still push out, and you can add soil without putting any more soil on. Here's another one. So I've been trying to put less perlite on, and so that's a little bit, you know, it's just feeling it out, seeing what I like and what'll work better for me. And then I can go through, and a lot of times what it is when I water it, the water pushes, it comes down and it lifts the seed up, but because the perlite's so light, it actually will come up through the perlite. So I just have to double check and make sure. The thing is, because peppers are so, they can be slow to grow inside because still the temperature of your house, once you remove the bottom heat's not as high as it would like. It takes longer to grow. So you start them earlier, and then we fertilize them. When we get our first set of true leaves, we'll go ahead and drop our fertilizer in and get that ready to go. I'm gonna be doing a video soon in my house with all of the seeds that I've started so far. I don't know at what point, but it'll be soon. I'll show you the fertilizers and all that stuff. So it should be helpful for you, but this is, I mean, this is the kickoff of the summer growing season for me. Not growing, but starting season. So we'll start our peppers today, and then in 2 weeks we'll come back and we'll start our tomatoes, and we'll just keep moving forward, and it's going to be rapid succession from this point out. So what peppers are you growing, and what kind of issues have you had with your peppers? Let us know in the comments below.